wonderful parade. It's a day well on Mulberry Street and now Maple Street. Anyway, everyone's having a great time all the way down, people waving all down whole street, kids, families. It's been a wonderful trip, wonderful day.
Dr. Seuss makes reading so magical, and that is the secret sauce.
Dr. Seuss was a genius, and there's no doubt. And to be able to change the way children read forever and the way children's books were written is truly genius. And that's why those books resonate year after year, generation after generation. And to be a small part of being able to pass that on to each generation is an honor, and we take it quite seriously.
I'm kind of secretive. I'm in the shadows, and I don't really want to be known or seen. This is all about Dr. Seuss, who was my stepfather. And I kept it a good secret until I was about 45, when Springfield found me, interviewed me. I'm a sculptor, and I passed the interviews, and I got the job. And my husband was my business partner, and it took 6.5 years. And then I thought, okay, that's it. I can go back in the closet and be quiet, and nobody will know who the hell I am. And Springfield had different ideas. They wanted me to write a book about the story behind the making of the Dr. Seuss Memorial. It came out this weekend. It's hot off the press, literally. And Springfield published it. And it's my first book, and it took 15 years for me to figure out how to write. And then I thought it was done again, but then the museum came along, and my sister and I donated everything we had. And then I called Ted's great-nephew, Theodore Owens, Ted Owens, and he had things that he's donated. And I thought I was done again. But now I'm doing work for Forest Park here in Springfield, and I'm doing a bas-relief in honor of Theodore Robert Geisel, Ted's father, who was the superintendent of Forest Park. And I don't think I'm going to ever be done with Springfield, and that's just fine.
Well, there are so many children's book authors and illustrators living in this area. When I first moved here, I had no idea, and then it turned out to be just this unbelievable commune of children's book authors and illustrators, and the energy level is pretty intense, actually. You know, everybody's working on different projects, different styles, different concepts, and so. You know, it just everybody kind of feeds off of each other's energy, and it really builds up to quite a frenzy, actually, and especially tonight.
So I'm the first one in line, and I really like Dr. Seuss because he writes funny books for kids and he makes people smile, and I think that's a good thing because when people are laughing, it's kind of like good medicine, and you can laugh with your friends and you can laugh with anybody, and I think Dr. Seuss books are really silly too.
One fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish.
excited to see the museum, and because it combines the art and the words of Dr. Seuss, and I know that he had a challenge with The Cat in the Hat. He said he could teach children to read with this book, and by doing a little research, I found that out. And before I was a children's book illustrator, I taught kindergarten and second grade. And they loved the Dr. Seuss books, and the fact that they could fill in the rhyme before they could read was the beginning to reading for them. And so I appreciate what he did, and he made it look so simple, and everybody thinks they can do a Dr. Seuss rhyme. And as I know from reading lots of manuscripts, not everyone can. I think learning to read opens up so many worlds for children. I actually remember when I first learned to read, and I followed my mother around the house reading to her, and I remember the first night that I could read a story, and she was getting ready to go out to a meeting and putting her makeup on, and I sat in the bathroom while she put makeup on, reading a book to her. And I don't know, it just had always been a mystery to me. And as I said, it just opened up worlds. And now I have grandchildren that are learning to read. And it's so exciting. And my littlest one is 5, and her other grandparents gave her a Dick and Jane book actually to read. So she's saying that she can read chapter books, and her 11-year-old sister says that's not a chapter book, but trying to squelch some of her excitement. But I just remember my excitement, and I see the excitement in my children who are grown, and now my grandchildren. And even now for me, just sitting and reading a book, just it's almost meditative. It just takes me away. And I also think that reading to children begins the process. And when a child sits on a parent's lap, the rest of the world stops, and it's just quiet. All else ceases, and there they are with the word and the book and the pictures, and snuggled up and reading. And I can't think of anything better than that.
Well, I'm president of Dr. Seuss Enterprises, and I'm so thrilled to be here because I've worked with the Springfield Museums now for almost 10 years on this project. So the reality of the museum opening hasn't almost hit yet, and I'm thrilled that it's going to happen. Well, when you see it on paper, you think in your head you know what it's going to look like, but then when you actually walk in, it really comes to life. And to walk in and see Ted's childhood home, to get to walk through and maybe see the bakery that his mother worked in, and then to have the stories jump to life, it's almost overwhelming. It's so beautiful. Dr. Seuss Enterprises' mission is to protect the integrity of these works and to follow the direction that Ted Geisel himself set down. We're very particular as to who we work with and what kind of projects we do. So our job is to look at every project and make sure that we're capturing his vision, maybe his DNA, and to make sure that each project is on point. We're very particular. Well, Dr. Seuss was a genius, and there's no doubt. And to be able to change the way children read forever and the way children's books were written is truly genius. And that's why those books resonate year after year, generation after generation. And to be a small part of being able to pass that on to each generation is an honor, and we take it quite seriously. I'll tell you what's amazing about this museum and the project is it's a true collaboration. This isn't a project that just the Springfield Museum could put on. It's not a project that just Dr. Seuss could put on, and it's not a project that just the family could put on. But we all needed to work together with the community of Springfield to bring this vision to life. And there's no other project we've worked on, and no other place in the world that exists. That's what makes this so special, and then one of the reasons we're so excited about it. Well, Dr. Seuss not only was he a children's book writer, but he was an illustrator and an artist. So to recreate his art and have it feel authentic was quite a challenge. When we got to work with John, we knew that that was the right person to do this. He is also a genius in his own right, and the meticulous attention to detail that John put in and the hours he put in really can't be replicated. I mean, part of the reason that this museum is so special is because of that team, and the team that was led by John, and the care and the love he put into it. I can't thank him enough for that.
I should have been absolutely terrified, and I probably should have said no, because I was brand new to being a sculptor. I was living in Hawaii, and I was doing 7-9-inch hula dancers. I was learning my trade, brand new. I'd never done a portrait of someone before. I'd never worked life-size, but they came to me, and I felt I could do it, and I built a good team around me, and it took 6.5 years, but I had good people by my side. I had 3 foundries, I had my husband, I had all these wonderful people in Springfield, and I learned. I learned quickly. I don't understand him. He disturbs me. How can one man do all of that and at that speed? Why doesn't he ever look tired? Why does he always look like he just came back from a vacation? He never, I don't even see him work. I don't know what happens. He's superb. I know Ted's work, and I've gone all over that museum, and it's Ted's work. What got through to kids is that Ted spoke their language. It wasn't, I was raised on See Dick Run, See Mary Trip, Fall, whatever. He speaks their language, and it's so much fun, and it's all fantasy. And children are all about fantasy, and they have wonderful imaginations. And he's making up words, and it has a wonderful rhythm to it. It got him, it hooked him. And before they know it, they're reading. They're loving the written word. It's what my sister and I have kept and held on to. Going back to the early 1960s, it's just his way of communicating. He's such a sweet, dear man. And he would send us these little cat notes and these drawings, and he'd write little poems on money when he was on a trip from foreign countries, and just the weirdest, sweetest Seussian stuff coming down. And Lee and I just kept it because we loved the man. We weren't thinking there was going to be a museum someday, or we could sell this on eBay and then make a fortune. It meant it was just so dear and special, and we would never ever sell anything he ever gave us. My tax woman couldn't believe we were giving all this stuff away. She said, "Are you crazy?" I said, "No, it was a gift from a special man, and I want to give it as a gift to a special city, and that would be Springfield. It needs to come home, and it's here now." My sister was on board. I was on board. We couldn't get it here fast enough. I talked to the great nephew, and he's on board. Every cat note he ever gave us, any illustration he gave us. My sister somehow got all the furniture out of the sitting room in the studio. She has the desk, she has the sofa, she has the chair. I don't know how she did this. I thought it was all gone. It's here. You've got it, guys. And then we have Theophrastus, which is his boyhood toy. It's a dog, stuffed dog. It's sitting on his sofa. His mother, Henrietta, gave it to him when he was a little boy, living on 74 Fairfield Street here in Springfield.
It's so exciting to be here tonight. I mean, I grew up with Dr. Seuss. My mom was a first grade teacher, so we always had Dr. Seuss books in the house. The thing about being a children's book author is, well, for one thing, it's a dream come true. But I remember growing up just loving books so much that I would have my mother read to me at night before I went to bed. But as soon as I began to read, I read to her every night. And I knew I wanted to be part of that world no matter what. And growing up with books around me, going to the library every week, I knew that that was an integral part of my life. So to be a part of it is amazing. I grew up in Monterey Park, California, and the Rugmar Memorial Library was my second home. In fact, I'd go there, I read so many of the books, I read all the books in the children's section, that I got a special library card so I could read other books. But now when I travel a lot for my work, since I'm an author, and every town I go to, I always visit the library. It's like going home again, even if you've never been there before. Dr. Seuss and his books are amazing. I mean, it's one of those things when growing up and you saw a Dr. Seuss book, you know you couldn't go wrong. And the stories stay with me even today, like Horton Hears a Who. It's not just the illustrations which are amazing, but the stories that draw you in and the lessons you learn from it. And the fact that you don't even know you're learning a lesson, you know, you're laughing and you're enjoying it. It's like, that's what I want to do. For anyone who wants to write, my advice would be read, write, and read some more.
Well, there are so many children's book authors and illustrators living in this area. When I first moved here, I had no idea, and then it turned out to be just this unbelievable commune of children's book authors and illustrators, and the energy level is pretty intense, actually. Everybody's working on different projects, different styles, different concepts, and so it just everybody kind of feeds off of each other's energy, and it really builds up to quite a frenzy, actually, and especially tonight. Well, first of all, Dr. Seuss, it was the first book I ever learned to read on my own, was Fox and Socks, and I grew up in Syracuse, New York. And I was in the back seat of my parents' station wagon. We were driving around Onondaga Lake, which was the most polluted lake in the country at the time, and it smelled like stinky socks. And I was reading Fox and Socks, and I suddenly figured it out. I cracked the code, and it was the perfect book to be reading as we were driving around this stinky sock lake. So it's just burned into my memory. I just felt so excited being able to do that on my own. Bartholomew Cubbins and the 500 Hats, Bartholomew Cubbins and the Oobleck. My grandmother used to read those books to me all the time, and I would check them out of my school library over and over just so she could read them to me over and over again. Especially loved the Oobleck, slime that pours out of the sky and buries the entire town. And then the other book that really got me inspired to make my own books was one that he wrote. It was called On Beyond Zebra. And it was an imaginary alphabet that he created, and he has all these bizarre animals whose names begin with the imaginary letters, and I just felt compelled to make my own alphabet and create my own creatures and write my own books with my own ideas, but all sort of coming from his inspiration. So yeah, just loved his stuff, especially years ago when I was a kid, so yeah.
Seuss is iconic. There's no getting away from it. But I probably, first of all, I'm the oldest living children's book author here today. I go back to the times when Bennett Cerf was running Random House. I was an editor there. I was in Knopf. And Christopher Cerf was one of my best friends. So I got a little peek into all the things that were happening, Dr. Seuss-wise, back in the early 60s. Well, I find it interesting. In some ways, you would think that something written back then would be dated. But in fact, it isn't dated. It's iconic. And that means it breaks bounds, it breaks borders, it makes its own rules, just as the characters in his books make their own rules. I also think it's interesting that there are 3 children's book people that I think are, I would say, they epitomize in themselves the rules breakers, just as their books, just as their characters do. 2 of them are in Western Massachusetts. One was Dr. Seuss, of course. The other is Mo Willems, and the third is I'm going to space on his name now. He wrote Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Roald Dahl. They all wrote characters that were rule breakers. They all, in a sense, encourage that kind of wild play in kids, and then always bring it back at the end to quiet and now we've done everything we've needed to do. As the Cat in the Hat says, he puts everything back so that nobody except the children knew what happened, right? So that kind of rule breaking in children's books, those are the 3 masters. And to have 2 of them in Western Massachusetts is amazing. I've always said that literature begins at the cradle. And when I've taught children's literature, I teach writers, and I can't emphasize enough that you have to write a book up to the children, not down to them. Because this is going to be their first chance at literature, they're going to find words that they've never heard anywhere else, but in the pages of a book. They are going to understand connectivity because the incidents in the books have to connect. So when you hear a story or read a story, you're going to connect. So everything connects. Seuss does that brilliantly. Even when you think it's anarchic, it comes around in the end. And that's the brilliance of a really good writer for children. I knew Dr. Seuss almost before I started publishing. I think I may have had 2 books out at that point. Now, next year, I'm going to have 365 books out, or 366, so you will be able to read a book of mine a day for a year, even if it's a leap year. And I want to thank Dr. Seuss for that.
I visit a lot of schools. I started visiting schools back in 1987, talking to kids about literature, writing, drawing, and I've now been to over 2,700 schools. I've seen a lot of kids. And so anytime I have the opportunity to do something that's related to a Dr. Seuss book, this is great. This is a great event for me because when I was a kid, Dr. Seuss was like my first books, and I grew up on them. And now sharing my love of books, the books I do, the books that other people do, it all goes back to me being a kid getting excited about, the Dr. Seuss cat in the hat. I love the cat in the hat. In fact, if you look at my shoes, I know you can't look at them, but I have some Dr. Seuss Converse All-Stars on that I actually bought. Yeah, they're the Grinch that stole Christmas. So it's a really great feeling to come here. It gets me so excited. I can't wait to go home. I got to drive to New York tonight to get my daughter, but when I get home, this has energized me to want to go and work on another one of my books, which everybody wants to be doing. Everybody wants to get charged up, and this is that kind of event that'll get you charged up and want to go do that. You may have heard a story like this in the past, but when I was a kid, I loved baseball. Okay, little kid loved baseball. We played baseball. Kids, you don't see them playing catch as much as we used to, but in my town that I grew up, Boylston, Massachusetts, there was the public library, and in the summer we'd go out, we'd play, we'd catch, we'd be sweating, a bunch of little boys all sweaty and gross, and we'd go to the public library because it was the only air-conditioned building in the town. So we'd go in, and now the librarian there loved us coming in, and she would share books with us, and I always got the Dr. Seuss books over and over again. They were just funny. They were just the imagination, the creativity. They were, outside the box compared to some of the books that I had read. So that's kind of like where I got into reading, was through playing baseball, really, but then having a great librarian who really let us come into her library, and she'd pick out the books. Now I got to tell you another story. My elementary school, they had a brand new library. The librarian thought the books were hers. She wouldn't let you go in. She wouldn't let the teachers go into the library. So I didn't really read books so much in school. It was really at the public library, because that librarian understood that you had to get kids excited about the books early. The school library, you'd have to stand in line outside your classroom. She'd come down with a metal push cart with books on it, and you'd line up in alphabetical order, and you'd choose a book. Now, if your last name was Zimmerman, guess what book you'd get? So it was really the love that the public librarian had for children and children's literature that got me to be excited about books and about reading and about drawing too.
Well, I grew up on Dr. Seuss. I adore Dr. Seuss. I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like them, Sam, I am. That was the refrain of my childhood because I was a very picky eater. So I just loved that there was somebody else in a book who didn't like certain foods. And I loved the Cat in the Hat because the Cat in the Hat could get into all kinds of mischief, but at the end of the day was still lovable. So the fact that I live in Holyoke, the next town over from Springfield, where this museum is going to be, is thrilling. The fact that I'm going to be able to see Dr. Seuss's desk where he wrote his books, I'm so thrilled. I just cannot wait. I find it all very inspiring. Because of Dr. Seuss, I write children's books in rhyme, and that was a direct influence by Dr. Seuss. And also, I've taken Dr. Seuss's poems and written imitations of them in a serious way. My mom was really sick and died of cancer, and one way to get me through was to write about her illness, and I wrote a poem called Pills, 1 pill, 2 pills, red pills, blue pills, and it went on and on and on. And so Dr. Seuss is very close to my heart, and was very close to my mom's heart. Well, it's very validating to see yourself in a piece of literature. When I grew up, there were really no books that showed a kid like me, which was a kid who came from a Jewish family. So there was no kid eating matzo ball soup with her bubby on a Friday night, for example. So I write books that have Jewish kids in them. I also write books that have about kids who have 2 moms. So it's very important for a kid with 2 moms or 2 dads to see themselves in a book. So I try to write books that validate kids who come from all kinds of families. Well, I may be the Cat in the Hat actually inspired my love of cats. So ever since I left home, I have had a cat in my life. Right now I have a 11-year-old cat named Neshama. Neshama means soul in Hebrew. And before that I had a cat named Princess Sheba Darling, and a cat named Precious Sammy Dearest, and a cat named Couscous. So my love of cats, I never really thought about that before, I think came from the Cat in the Hat, because my cats are as mischievous as the Cat in the Hat. And in fact, I wrote a book called Cats, Cats, Cats about 60 cats who get into all kinds of trouble. So again, I think that's a direct lineage to Dr. Seuss and the Cat in the Hat.
I grew up in a family filled with children's book writers, so there's never been a day in my life that I haven't been in this business. My mom's a writer, my grandfather was a writer, but not of children's books. And both of my brothers work in children's books as well. So Dr. Seuss is kind of like an advanced class in children's books. And so for us, having the Dr. Seuss Museum in our backyard, because we are Hatfield folk, so it's not very far away, is a really wonderful addition to the children's book community that we already have here. So growing up in children's books and being of somebody who is interested in children's books and who works in children's books, the visual arts are always so wonderful. And for me, sculpture is always a step even further into it. So it's taking what's on the page, which is, flat, and making it come to life. So for me, the sculpture garden is a bit like that. I love anything that takes picture books and illustration and takes it a step further. Well, I think that one of the things, and I think a lot of us will say maybe the same thing, is that when we write, we never try to write for a kid. Kid knows that right away. We try and write something that is wonderful and fun and entertains the kid who we are, not even who we were, but the kid inside us right now. And especially with picture books, and this with Dr. Seuss, these are read aloud books. And when a book is read aloud, it's a very special experience between the writer and the child listener and the reader, and that's usually a 3-person thing, and the book being the additional object. So always thinking about all those parts of a book really brings the child into the book itself, and I think that's what interests the youngest kids in reading in picture books. Just read everything, and we're lucky enough in this country to have free libraries. And I'd like to think that we have libraries in every school. Unfortunately, we do not even in Massachusetts, believe it or not. But there are always ways to get books. There are new free libraries everywhere. And just read, because when you read, you learn what you like. And the funny thing is you also learn what you don't like. So it teaches you how to write the way you would want to read. Dr. Seuss is such a presence, not only in kids who are reading in their lives, but in everybody's life who writes books. And it doesn't matter if you write like Dr. Seuss or completely different from Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss is really maybe the fairy godfather of our business. We all have a relationship with his work that goes back to our childhood, or if some of us weren't child readers, believe it or not. I know it sounds crazy. So even as an adult, you have a relationship with Dr. Seuss and what he wrote. And we in the Valley, there are so many authors and illustrators who live here in the Connecticut River Valley. And we all we feel like neighbors to him. And I love that connection that we have to him.
because I have such fond memories of reading Dr. Seuss books as a kid, and then also I connect his books to my own children. When I was a little girl, family lore has it that Green Eggs and Ham was my favorite book, to the point that my parents reread it so many times that they hid it on me. But by then I had it memorized, so I could just recite it. And then I have 6 children, my 7th on the way, and 4 of them came home through adoption. One was 8 years old, and when she came home, part of her adjustment to our home life was just finding anything that was familiar. And for her, The Cat in the Hat was a comfort book because she knew it from school. And so I will never forget seeing her the second day that she was home, just sitting and reading that book and feeling at home because of a book on our shelf. Well, I think the difference between teaching a child to love to read and teaching a child to read can really be grounded in the different forms of children's literature. I teach children's literature at Simmons College, and when I look at Dr. Seuss's work, he might be best known for really creating and revolutionizing the early reader, like The Cat in the Hat. And those are the books that help kids learn to read. But before that, we have the picture book. And the form, if you just think of how much bigger a picture book is in its trim size, it accommodates more than one reader. It implies a shared reading transaction. And so those picture books, that's where you teach a child to love to read, because you're sharing the reading with them. And then once you get that love, they can go on and not only learn to read by themselves, but want to.
I think there's actually less overlap between literacy work and creating books than people at first think. And you know, I don't have an agenda about I mean, I'm certainly very pro living in a literate society, but I don't have that agenda when I sit down to write a book. I just try to make something something that I will enjoy, that I think kids will enjoy. Frank Cottrell Boyce made a speech where he talked about pleasure as a kind of focus, and that's where his thesis was. That's where great ideas come from. Is just taking pleasure in what you're doing. And so in my own work, when I'm working on a book, I sometimes tell people what I do now is all the same stuff I did when I was a kid. I just do it with an adult skill set. So I like to think that that's why it speaks to kids, because I'm coming from the same place. So if I'm doing a school visit, a kid will come up to me and they'll say, "I'm writing a book now," or or they'll show me a picture they made or something like that. And so that's a really important moment. And so I try to give them, whether you want to call it validation or I don't think they're looking for approval. I don't want to just stamp like you did a good job, but just to say, thank you for showing me that. I see what you did, and I understand what you mean when you say this is meaningful to you. So that's the message I think that I'm trying to convey. I guess the thing is, I try to connect with them as a colleague. I try to treat them as a peer in that moment. Because the other and part of what I offer kids when I go to schools is, I'm brought in as a special guest, and so it's my job to do something different than what they get every other day. And one of the things that I bring in is that I don't have an agenda for them. They want to tell me they want to tell me they want to write a book. That's great. If they want to tell me they want to do something that has nothing to do with books, that's great too. Again, it's about pleasure. Do what makes you happy. Pursue that. That's way more important to me than I just don't think about whatever they should be doing. So, I will tell you, I went to Bard College in the early '90s, and though I was not a member of the Dr. Seuss Appreciation Society, I felt really proud to go to school that had one. And when he passed away, Bard College had a memorial service, and it was one of the biggest events on campus. The president of the college read a section of If I Ran the Circus. Different professors read different of his books. It was really a wonderful event.
I mean, this is a wonderful experience. First of all, having our school right on Mulberry Street is amazing. Dr. Seuss is well known around the world, and we are so fortunate that we can be part of something like this. I mean, his books are fabulous. Students are reading these from, birth till grown adults, so it's an amazing experience. Oh, his rhyming, I mean, right away, students here at Milton Bradley from kindergarten are learning rhyming words. And Dr. Seuss's books all have rhyming in them, and it's a perfect way to get students to sit down and just get involved and love and learn to love to read. Thank you. No, I think that's it. Thanks.
Egg, 1 fish, 2 fish, red fish, blue fish, and Glorax a lot. Those were my favorites.
Dr. Seuss's farm.
Well, my father brings me here. He's a local attorney on Maple Street. This is Marty O'Connell, and we're here to celebrate Dr. Seuss. And I went to high school up the hill at McDuffie when I was there, so it's nice to come home.
Before they got to choose what books we read, we got to choose what books to read. Dr. Seuss was at the top of the list.
I think it's great to see positive changes in Springfield, and I think that's really what drew us out here today.
I love Springfield and I love Dr. Seuss. We live on Fairfield Street where he grew up, and I've always been a fan of his books when I was reading them to my children, and now I'm doing work with early literacy myself in retirement, and this is the best thing that could have happened to Springfield now for the kids, for the city, and for the legacy of Dr. Seuss and his life in Springfield.
We find that children are natural rhymers. We have a grandchild of our own, and he just loves to rhyme. He wakes up and it's his cat in the hat as if he had known Dr. Seuss all his life. So books that are based on these sort of simple rhymes we think are great foundations for reading.
Oh, the fun of his books, just the wonderful, fantastical creatures he created, and the words that he's made up, they're now in the dictionary. So I think that the joy of just reading it out loud, which I think is really important to kids, to hear someone reading out loud, and his books are so perfect for that, for young children and parents to read to them.
Well, try to access that inner voice in you, and that's what I've done with the dog. I try to imagine how he would be, and then it comes out fine. And I think Dr. Seuss was sort of doing the same thing. I once read that all those animals that he drew, they really looked that way to him. So inspiration is the sort of thing where you try to see with kind of an inner voice. And I would encourage that to all children. Children do that naturally. They learn to not listen to that voice, and we should encourage them to hear that voice for themselves.
We were invited with the Miss Western Massachusetts Scholarship Organization to celebrate this amazing opening with all of these wonderful families, and we're just so excited to be a part of the event. I work with children, so I'm reading Dr. Seuss books every day, so it's really awesome to be a part of all the stories. I mean, the colors, the animals, really just providing enriching, fun pictures, gets children excited at the earliest ages of life.
I think pretty much the fact that I grew up with it. Dr. Seuss his books were pretty much the books that taught me how to read. I don't remember reading any other books other than those books at first.
Well, I like that he was funny and he wrote a lot of books.
How about you?
I like all of his books and the patterns he uses for the creatures and the good words he uses.
That was magic. How cool is that?
Hey, look at the big camera. Look at the camera. I like how he writes his stories and how he makes them really funny for kids to read.
I like his imagination and the drawings that he draws in his books.
I like how his books are, how he makes them not like human, and he makes them different than other kind of books.
Dr. Seuss helps you to read, so he doesn't write the books too complicated. He writes it easy with a bunch of pictures. So yeah, it's easier for kids to learn how to read.
I love Dr. Seuss!
Coming with my kids today, first of all, this means so much to me and my kids. We love Dr. Seuss, and it's so huge for the city of Springfield. I'm excited. I'm hoping people are inspired and come down and check it out. It's a beautiful museum. I got to see the inside of it yesterday, so It's awesome. It's got a lot of his own personal stuff in there. So I think that's what kind of makes it so special. And just walking in there feels like walking into one of his books, like walking into one of his cartoons. So it's a beautiful place. I encourage everybody to come down and check it out if they haven't yet. And yeah, I'm just super excited about this. Yes, the second floor. I was up there yesterday with with some of his family, including his stepdaughter, and just being around them while they were looking at the stuff, you can see the emotion. You can see even she got a little teary-eyed. And I was like, and I started feeling it. And I was like, oh wow, this is incredible. Like it's actually his personal stuff. Places where he sat down, tools he wrote with, pencils, paper, thing like that. And it's kind of like going back in history when you're up there. You're like, wow, he actually used a lot of this stuff. So it's pretty cool. It's real cool. Yeah, you know what? Myself, I remember being a child, of course. And now that with my kids, reading Dr. Seuss to them, it's almost like, you know, you have your own parents who raise you, and then there are those parents who are out there inspiring generations. And Dr. Seuss was one of those. And Dr. Seuss is almost like he's almost like a parent to these kids and to us, and for many generations to come. So it's awesome that we have the museum right here in Springfield. So it's pretty cool.
I have the One Fish, Two Fish, Blue Fish, Red Fish book from Dr. Seuss. I like about Dr. Seuss because the characters and the pictures that he made in the museum.
I like Dr. Seuss because he has a lot of creativity and his imagination just runs wild, and I like his books. I have all his books. I have One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish, Hop on Top. I have all of those, so I really like those books. When my brother was smaller and he didn't know how to read, I used to read him Dr. Seuss, and I feel like it helped him a lot because the words weren't as hard for him, and it wasn't really a boring book. It was really fun for him, so he learned quick how to read onto Dr. Seuss.
Being born and raised in the city of Springfield, we actually lived around the corner from Mulberry Street for a little while here in Ward 1. It was on Elliott. And Nevaeh's 10, he's 8, and he has another, now he gets to read to his baby sister soon because she's about 6 months. And what we've done collectively has been a true definition of Springfield, but being able to relate that Dr. Seuss is from here. And in the march today, just to be able to march down the same street he used to walk as a kid and show my kids, and then seeing his family history, you know, and how he was with his daughters and the notes that he used to leave them, it drives me and it shows me that, you know, he was family first, it was love, and the relationship that I want to build with my children is love first, and let them be who they want to be, and challenge them, but challenge them to be great and creative, and that's something that I've seen in all of my children.
No more geisels left in Springfield except me. I feel very privileged to be a part of this, and it warms my heart tremendously because of the memories I have with my Geisel family, and it's really an honor to be here and be a part of it. He had a great imagination and wonderful creativity. His books are so different from anything else that was published back when he first started in the 1950s. He had such an imagination, and it was so different from the Dick and Jane books that we all read before he published, and it holds the kids' attention so well because of the wonderful drawings and the wonderful writing. The kids never get sick of reading those books. They read them over and over and over. So he was a great man. To read some of his personal letters to Ted Owens and see his his childhood furniture, to see his sketch desk and his chair and all the little animals and hats that he loved. It's very exciting. And I personally love the genealogy painting, so you could trace, where your roots are. I saw my great-great-grandfather, Dr. Theodore Geisel, and I guess I'm in the lineage, I'm below him.
Yeah, my name is Ted Owens, and Ted Geisel was my great uncle. My grandmother was Dr. Seuss's sister, and so Dr. Seuss grew up on Fairfield Street. My mom grew up in the same house, the next generation. It was still owned by the family, and so Springfield has always been kind of a place where I've always heard stories, both from Ted Geisel, Dr. Seuss perspective, and from my mom's perspective of growing up here. And so to see all this coming back to the museum, it seems like kind of the perfect landing spot for his personal notes, photographs, albums. It's kind of the flip side that people do not really see a lot of. Everyone's familiar with his formal books, where he spent months and even years working on them. But when you go through the galleries here and you see the personal notes he wrote, his wit and his humor even comes through in those. So it's just another side of him that people aren't as familiar with. I grew up being in his studio sometimes when he had all the preliminary drawings on his walls for a lot of his books that are known. But I think what sticks in my mind for Dr. Seuss and Ted Geisel, who I knew him as, is his fine artwork, which isn't really well known by the general public. And his sense of color and composition is unlike anyone's I've ever seen. I mean, he's basically untrained in art. He never went to an art school, and yet he had a phenomenal sense of color and composition and a drawing style with cross-hatching and how he conveyed his characters that is just totally unique. But I think what I find really interesting about him is that he was not only an extremely accomplished artist, but he was also an extremely accomplished writer. And to have someone that had both of those abilities and was able to bring them in and combine them to tell a story that had an underlying meaning to it most of the time is I think what makes him truly unique. I think the most interesting aspect for me was walking into a room that contains personal letters, notes, and photographs that I've seen since a little kid that my mom had from her mother of the family of Dr. Seuss and how close-knit it was with his sister and his mother and father. And to see all these notes and photographs put into one room, all kind of formally displayed, where you can kind of see multi-decades of history all laid out in one space gives quite a strong emotional feel to it, to see just all that laid out and condensed into one area. Yeah, John I just met on this trip here. Until then, I've talked to him on the phone, and he sent me some videos of the installation, the progress that they've had as they've been painting things on the walls, and I'm just blown away that someone of his caliber was able to then translate it, because it's not an easy feat to do, to take all of this and try and get a cohesive feel and capture the feeling of Dr. Seuss without it being swayed by someone else's, direction or their artistic sentiment. So John did a fantastic job.
At school today, I was excited because I was going to be going in a parade. So I woke up so early to go in there, and I actually went in the parade, and I felt a little bit good about myself because I was in the parade, waving at everybody, just smiling. And now it's my first day coming to the Dr. Seuss Museum, and I'm really excited. I read to my sister, and her name is Mara. She's only 4 years old, and I read her Dr. Seuss. And the book is called Sam, I Am, You Eat Green Eggs and Ham. The the first time I ever started reading, she was actually excited and she just wanted to look at the pictures to like follow along with the story. So while I'm talking, she just follows along at the pictures and points to the picture of what I am saying.
Well, I think kids love rhymes, and so I would say, just because I like to rhyme too, but I think that kind of gets their attention. Plus the wonderful colors, and then they're great stories, many of which have a moral, and they don't know that, but it works.
Okay, so last night I was thinking, where am I going to take the kids tomorrow? And I said, let's take them to the library because it's been a while since we haven't gone to the library. And we ended up staying at this festival right here, Dr. Seuss. I think it's important because their vocabulary expands a lot and they learn much from the books. Unfortunately, I didn't have that growing up. My parents were working a lot and they didn't teach me, to read and find interesting books, but I'm glad I'm capable now to teach my kids to find good things to read and so they can expand their knowledge. I've read a couple of Dr. Seuss books. I think trying to understand the words that he's putting in the books, it brings us together, we're trying to find out what it really means. So I guess it unites families more, and I've taught them to love what they're reading and what they're trying to find the meaning of what they're reading so they can definitely understand it.
I love Dr. Seuss!
Awesome!